on today we're going to be starting our session on disaster management. We have with us Ambassador at Large, Dr. Damian Ramesar, all the way from Trinidad and Tobago, and wherever that coconut tree is. I want to welcome everyone, Bishop Comfort, Gerard and company. I know there's quite a few people there with you. Dr. White, Dr. Rebel, Dr. Steele, Pastor Tricia, Pastor John. Welcome, Pastor John, all the way from St. Lucia. And all the others that's joining with us right now, we welcome you. And at this moment, I'm going to turn it over to His Excellency, Dr. Damian Ramesar. We're going to get started on the session on disaster management. I'm going to just kindly ask everyone to stay muted during the course of the training so we don't cause any type of disruption to the session. Thank you once again, Dr. Damian.
Thank you for the honor and the privilege to share on this platform.
And if Dr. Damian, if you need us to interject at any given point, please feel free. Dr. Steele is here, Dr. Bishop Lamothe and myself. I'm going to mute out just not to cause any disruption myself. So the floor is yours at this moment.
Okay, I don't have authority to share screen for the PowerPoint.
It's there now. You should be able to.
All right, super. All right. Okay, great. Good evening, one and all, ladies, gentlemen, brothers, sisters, ambassadors, kings, queens, servants of the Most High. It is my honor and privilege to be able to share with you some principles this evening and on Thursday about disaster management, okay, in as part of the AUGP. What my company does, we are international change consultants. We consult in quality, occupational health, safety, environmental management, and general business management. With our partners, we have a combined experience base in industry of over 185 years, and we've served some of the largest, most dynamic organizations in the world, such as Alcoa Worldwide, Steamship, Rosabel Gold Mines, and IAM Gold, Heritage Petroleum, Staatsolie, quite a long list. EBS, Machapij in Suriname. We're just getting our feet wet into Guyana, where we're already doing some supplies and some training. We are the International Association of Safety, Health, and Environment Professionals Learning Center for Caribbean and the Latin American Basin. The IASHEP provides all OSHA-cited safety topic training. They also are the only organization that specializes in aviation training as well as nuclear training, but they also cover oil and gas, mining, general industry. We are also approved trainers for the ECSI, the Emergency Care and Safety Institute, and we do provide first responder training in support of our work that we do in disaster management preparation. Our last project was in the gold mine in Suriname. The Rosabel Gold Mine employs 2,200 people, and we had the opportunity to select and train 45 full-fledged firefighters. All right, so we selected them and trained them in industrial firefighting, paramedic, technical rope rescue, confined space rescue, extrication, a whole lot of different rescue courses. Right now, with Heritage Petroleum, we provide consultancy offshore and in land development. So that's in the upstream oil and gas drilling and exploration business. We also work with the gas to liquids plant in Trinidad, Nikwan Energy. We have consulted for port and terminal operations and a lot of different uh, clientele. Right now, we're getting back into food processing, bottling, and packaging with consulting and providing HACCP certification for several manufacturing plants. And this is a list of some of the memberships that we maintain in support of our business. So this evening and uh, in a couple of days, we will be looking at events such as hurricanes and epidemics, conflicts in nations, climate change, even. And there are a lot of economic and social impacts of natural and man made hazards increasing around the world. Right now, we are into the Western Hemisphere hurricane season. This normally runs from June to November. However, last year we had two storms being formed in December. So if that continues, if that trend continues, then we may see ourselves facing an extended hurricane season of June to December. Now, in 1982, if I'm correct, there was a Category 2 hurricane that hit Halifax, Canada on Christmas Eve. So these things can happen. So this course aims to promote your understanding of the principal determinants of disasters and help you with an evidence-based approach on the interdisciplinary and multi-sectoral frameworks that are required by a community to efficiently and effectively manage humanitarian aspects of a disaster. We're going to touch on key concepts in disaster management policy and practice, including such topics as hazard risk, vulnerability, resilience, and governance through the cycle of prevention, mitigation, preparedness, response, and early recovery. I'll be drawing heavily on the Australian um, disaster management framework because they are a continent that has been forced to respond to a lot of all kinds of different disasters. We don't often hear it on our news, but they face a frequency of disasters through their East Coast, North Coast, West Coast, and South Coast. Right? Most of their population lies on the coastal areas. And they face more disasters than the US seaboard does. So, in terms of their ability to respond, they pride themselves on being a very resilient community, but resilience comes from work. Now, in 1 Peter 5, 8, and 9, it tells us to be sober and be alert. Your enemy, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion looking for someone to devour. Now, some people, unfortunately, lose their lives in disaster management, in disasters, sorry. And sometimes families are left to pick up the pieces after a loved one gets hurt or is killed from the effects of a disaster, whether it's a forest fire, a tornado, a hurricane, an earthquake. These things do cause damage. Now, if we resist him, the devil that is, standing firm in the faith, because we know that the family of believers throughout the world will face similar suffering. However, it is up to us, the servants of God, to equip ourselves with knowledge and information. All right? We are supposed to be gainfully occupying and being victorious in this life. So we have decided with the AUGP that we will partner and share some simple, practical, and theoretical knowledge about what a community and what you, a community leader, can do in terms of disaster management. So in this program, we normally would have as the first module 4 contact hours. However, we're going to condense it down into 2 hours, 1 hour today and 1 hour on Thursday. And we're going to touch on some of these topics, but you will have, as a resource, access to the PowerPoints so that you can read at your leisure. And you will also have access to me so that you can email me or WhatsApp me or use Telegram or call directly. If you have questions, concerns, you need some advice, um, anything that you need further information of, you can always get a hold of me and we'll be very happy to help. So what we're going to cover is some emergency management versus disaster management concepts, the elements for mitigating disasters and emergencies, a little bit about planning, preparedness, and response, and then recovery. So on Thursday, we're going to look at planning, preparedness, response, recovery, and a chaplain's role with interagency interactions. Weather events make the Caribbean one of the most disaster-prone areas in some form or fashion. We are subject to these hurricanes. There was a very close call not even a month ago in Trinidad with a tropical storm that intensified into a hurricane pretty close to Trinidad. Now, the only other time that I can recall a hurricane intensifying so quickly from tropical storm to hurricane was in 2010 with Hurricane Tomas. And virtually during the course of one afternoon, it went from tropical storm to Category 2 hurricane, and Trinidad narrowly escaped being ravaged by a Category 2 hurricane. Most countries throughout the Caribbean since 2010 have disaster management laws that say that disaster management stakeholders must be ready and equipped to help the community prevent, prepare, respond to, and recover from both natural and man-made disasters. So this little 2-hour session is only a guide for you. So under a country's authorizing environment, and in this case, we're looking at Australia, they would have had a Disaster Management Act established at some point in time, 2003 in the case of Australia. And then from the act, they issue to every community disaster management regulation. They will also develop a strategic policy statement as a government, as a responsible government. And from that policy statement, there will be state disaster management plans, district disaster management plans, and then local community disaster management plans, all done under a disaster management guideline document. Because standardization is important, and we don't want one community in San Fernando doing something and then finding themselves having problems to respond to help people in Port of Spain, in the case of Trinidad, or in Jamaica. Let's say there's people in Montego that may face a hurricane, but because Kingston does things differently, you have people on the ground having logistical problems to send aid to Montego Bay. So this is why across a country, there are disaster management guidelines. And now virtually every country in the Caribbean has it published. So you can find it online. The aim of any guideline on prevention, preparedness, response, and recovery is to provide good practice suggestions and advice to those responsible for implementing disaster management practices. So your national guideline is an important document that you would like to peruse, and it's available online in your country. There's also, I can access also Barbados documentation online, right? You just need to search. Now, in each of the acts, a designated officer or agency is responsible for preparing guidelines to inform groups about matters relating to the government's preparation plans, matters that they should include in their community disaster management plan, and other matters about operations of district groups and local groups. So your you may be pastor of a group of churches that operate in several communities. It is important for your church as an organization to have a disaster management plan. Reason being, when disaster strikes a community, people tend to look to the church for assistance. So when the disaster occurs, if you have no plan, you will be facing some degree of uncertainty and uncoordination. This could lead to injury of people. This could lead to logistical problems and, plain and simple, wasting time trying to get help for people who come to the church looking for assistance. All right, so think about it. Those of you who don't have a plan yet, I recommend that you start forming a plan. You know, there's the age old adage, if you fail to plan, plan to fail. And we know that since Hurricane Katrina, even up to today, just last week, I was looking through a couple articles to send to a friend of mine, and I saw some mention of Joel Osteen's refusal to open his church to hurricane victims. And I thought, but wait, this happened since 2020 something, more than 10 or 12 years ago with Hurricane Katrina. And it's still making news that this man refused to open his church building to the needy. So we don't want to be having that type of negative connotation in people's head, because the world is unforgiving to us who are believers. Um, so it's if you're informed, it is in your best interest to prepare. So under disaster management, there are several approaches: a comprehensive approach or an all hazards approach, a focus on local disaster management capability, or support by state groups and district groups to local governments. Under the comprehensive approach, this is where the state, whether it's Grenada or Martinique, would seek to emphasize prevention measures, preparedness of the infrastructure and its people, response, and recovery. This would ensure a balance between the reduction of risk and the enhancement of community resilience, while ensuring effective response and recovery capability. So what does all that mean? It means that there is work to be done to minimize risk. First of all, what can we do to prevent the effects? There's not much we could do to stop a hurricane or an earthquake, but there's a lot that we could do to prevent the effects. And some of the measures of prevention and mitigation include a building code at a national level, and then inspectors enforcing the building code to make sure that people build their houses to withstand at least a category 2 hurricane, and withstand that their roof is constructed so that it doesn't get ripped to shreds with the wind, so that there's less burden on the community and the state resources. Because if you build well, you will be able to withstand. Then there's the element of preparedness. Everybody and every community is encouraged to prepare. How do you exactly prepare? The first thing is knowledge. You prepare your mind, and then you can do things that will help you to face the disaster. So, if you know that a hurricane is coming, then you know to prepare, build your windows a certain way, make sure you stock food, water, medicine, and you make a plan. Now, I'm pretty sure that out of the 20 something people listening to me right now, hardly anybody has spent any time to prepare a personal or family emergency response plan. If you were to be faced with a fire or a hurricane, what do you do? Well, there's a lot of information about what you can do, and there's a lot of resources online. Uh, there are governments that are distributing printed material telling you how to prepare. But what we have found in the Caribbean is that I would say 85 to 90% of the population are just too lazy to sit down, think about it, and make a plan for how my family is going to survive a disaster. So, to add further fuel to this fire, while the government is doing a lot of things, the government has no warehouse sitting, waiting with a bunch of supplies to get you back on your feet. Not even in advanced societies like Australia or Norway. What they might have is some relief supplies that, should you really survive a very bad disaster, at least you can get some supplies to help you recover and take care of the survivors for a period of time.
Dr. Damian,
Yes, sir.
I believe Professor Bartzi has a question.
Mm,
Um, let me
um,
just to get everybody on board. Professor, I see that you raised your hand.
oh, yes, I do see it now.
We will answer questions after unless it's urgent. Professor? All right, we'll just continue
All
on.
right.
We'll,
Yeah, I
we'll
guess
get to
we'll
the
catch him
questions
at the end.
after, okay?
No problem.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, so bearing in mind that there's not much aid that will come to you post disaster, it makes sense that you plan. Now, this is a biblical principle. We have several parables and stories, right? Where the bridegroom cometh, and I'm pretty sure everybody remembers that story. And there were some prepared virgins and some foolish virgins who did not take stock of the situation. And then when it was time, they were asking for assistance, when what they needed to do was to make provisions. Now, in Proverbs 31, it also talks about the kind of woman that would take care of her family. She lays up provisions in advance. And all through the Bible, and I'm pretty sure there are some of us here who read the Bible, it is a biblical principle that you prepare and you save certain things for a rainy day. Now, when we say a rainy day, we mean a disaster. So I will encourage each of us who listening, 27, 28 of us who are listening, to sit down and make sure you take at least a half hour and prepare a personal plan. What will you do? What resources you need? And make the effort to gather some resources. That's something that I have taught my family. Every year we practice it. My kids, 10 and 7, they have their bug out bags. And in their bug out bag, they have rations, right? And I've taught them how to manage that rations for at least 5 days. I don't go with 3 days, I go with 5 days. And how to manage their clothing for 5 days. They have emergency response information. Um, they have down to fire starters to make a fire if they need to. Now, I'm not saying to be doomsday preppers, but I am advocating highly that everybody do some type of preparation for the type of disaster that you could be faced. And then after you've done that planning, it will be easier for you to encourage your relatives, your neighbors, and friends to do the same. So think about it. If nobody was prepared for a disaster and it struck, what would happen to the community? The disaster may close off roads and access to you. Do you have enough supplies to survive until help can get to you? It's recommended minimum 3 days. Now, with the intensity of disasters increasing, a lot of people have revised their guidelines to say 5 days. So if when they were saying 3 days, I prepared for 5 days, now they're saying 5 days, I'm going to prepare for 7 or 8 days. But that's just me. Maybe you want to take a look at it for yourself. Now, when you have prepared your own house, then you can prepare your church community or your neighborhood or your street for the very minimal. And I'm always reminded of the friend of mine who I worked with. He told me when I first did a session, an awareness session on hurricane preparedness, he told me about the 1982 Halifax hurricane. And he told me that there were some people who prepared to dig in for the winter because that was their habit. But Halifax normally doesn't have very harsh winters. But after the hurricane, because of the damages that occurred, the ones who prepared were the ones that ended up feeding the entire community until the military could get in with some relief supplies. And that took at least until New Year's. So after Christmas Day, people were met with a wrecked street and houses damaged, a couple of them on fire. And the ones that prepared were the ones that ended up saving the communities. I remember also in 2003 in St. Martin, after the hurricane, there were 30 something deaths, but it took the country 38 days to restore power. They had to ration drinking water. So think about these things. 38 days with no drinking water in your taps, no stores open, a state of martial law and curfew. And right now, we've been living close to these conditions for extended periods in certain countries where you're not allowed to move freely and businesses are closed. So, how do you manage when businesses are closed? You have to prepare for it. We still have utilities while we have lockdown restrictions. But with extended lockdown and inability to go to work, a lot of families that live paycheck to paycheck are feeling it. All right, let's move on a little bit. The all hazards approach assumes that the functions and activities used to manage one event are likely to be applicable to a range of events, whether they're natural or caused by human activity. Local disaster management capability is the frontline. The local level capability is the frontline for disaster management due to the benefits of localized knowledge and networks. All right, so in some countries, the law says local governments are primarily responsible for managing the event at their local level. So you'll have to check with what your laws say and what it permits local communities to do. Some countries have support district and state groups. Some countries simply do not. They don't have those resources. For example, in Grenada, while I spent some time in Grenada, I know they had been totally devastated by Hurricane Ivan some years ago. And then they were hit by a hurricane called Emily, and they faced a few tropical storms after that. But Grenada as a country, the GDP and the population being so small, they simply do not have a lot of resources. So one of the ways they prepared was by establishing the building code. If you're building a new building in Grenada, it must meet certain criteria. And then when you, let's say you want to go to Grenada as a citizen or a long stay permit application, they take you to certain websites that encourage you how to prepare because they're simply in the hurricane belt. In James, this passage of scripture talks about being part of a community. All right. If is anyone among you in trouble, we have a responsibility to respond and to help. All right. Oh, sorry. Let me go back here. Let me touch on a couple of things about utilities. When you're checking with your local laws, also speak to someone if you can about the role of the utility people. All right, that's your supply of gas, electricity, telecommunications, water, and sewage infrastructure. Now, what we found in the Caribbean was because these are small countries with limited resources, they have a challenge with preparing these utility companies, for example, the water company, in being able to respond quickly after a hurricane. Now, think about it. The people that work at these companies, the gas company or the electricity company, they're not isolated when the disaster strikes. They and their families have to be prepared similarly. And they're going to face the same challenges that you will. They're people too. After the disaster, they have a responsibility to get out there and try to bring things back to normal. So when you're preparing your personal disaster management plans, spare a thought for these people who are frontline. All right, the people at a hospital. Not all of them are going to stay at the hospital in the face of an imminent storm. They would want to go home to their families. Lessons learned is an important aspect. And in the Caribbean, lessons learned are shared on the SIDEMA and SIDERA platform. That's the Caribbean Disaster Emergency Response Agency, and SIDEMA is the management agency, right? They're both based in Barbados. They have annual conferences. They did it virtually this time, and they update information, and their role is to strengthen not only institutions and governments but community groups. So you can get a lot of resources from Sidera and Sidema. You just simply need to go on their website and put out a request to them if you need additional information and assistance. So there are certain roles and responsibilities under the national plan where you have disaster management groups. There are certain groups that have a responsibility. For example, in Trinidad, CPEP contractors have been asked to coordinate post disasters, post events, to supply skilled and manual labor workers to go help with cleanup. Now, this doesn't mean that they're there and waiting. It is if they are available after the event, if they could coordinate quickly and deploy, right? They're not under any legal mandate, but they are asked to respond after an event. There may be coordination centers established where you live. If not, then the church has the opportunity to create and train its people and prepare to be a coordination center. If you do that, you will need to tell the disaster management agencies what you're doing, what you've done, so that you can align with them. And of course, we talked about disaster management plans. And the fact that you're being trained right now shows that you're interested in being a functional lead. And then from that, you can speak with different hazard specific agencies and specific purpose communities. For example, I know a lot of churches have banded together to go find the needy people in the pandemic, find the needy families, and try to bring some aid to them. And that's highly commendable. But they can't do it without proper organization, coordination of logistics, and without information that tells them who are the vulnerable and the needy. So this is one structure that is in Australia: the local, district, state, and then of course the government agency. In Trinidad, we have an Office of Disaster Preparedness and Management that comes under our Ministry of National Security. So at the state level, we have the ODPM. The ODPM has done a lot of work in Trinidad in training disaster management groups in every district. Where I live, I represent the Marabella community together with the councillor for the area and the MP. Fortunately for me, these are my high school buddies, and we all get together at least once every 6 weeks to discuss how things are going and, to update each other. So at the district level, we know who are some of the people that can help manage and coordinate in event of a disaster. But in my small community, my smaller community, which is called Mirage Lands, I have a couple of neighbors, and we fortunately are well organized that we know that where I live, it's a community of about 150 houses. We know every single house who's there, and we could coordinate not by WhatsApp or by telephone calls, but by foot, by walking to the through the neighborhood to make sure that everybody's okay. And then after that, I've also posed to them, there are next door vulnerable communities that, depending on the scale of an event, we have to be ready to help them too. And it took a little while, but now we're in agreement. All right. So in my case, we have a local recovery group. All right. This took some work, being spearheaded by both the counselor and aided by myself and some of the neighbors who have the ability. Um, in the community here, we have no religious influence, but should we have no church in the immediate vicinity, but we know where the churches are next door and the mosques as well as the Hindu temples. We have reached out to the different leaders to let them know that we are organized, and should the need arise, feel free to reach out to us so that our own membership may give assistance. All right. So to get to that level, it's going to take work by you who are in the know. And as I said, you have a lot of homework to do to prepare yourself, secure your own interests, and then to build the resilience of your community, of your church group, of your tribe, of your indigenous nation. Wherever you rub shoulders with people at your workplace, there's going to be some degree of spreading the news needed. Local disaster coordinators, this may be elected, or this may be a little bit more informal. In the case of my community, it's more informal, and we've let everybody know who are the people with the information and the authority to reach out to governments, agencies. At the district level in Trinidad, we have the ODPM, and in each regional corporation, that is the larger cities, we have disaster management centers, DMC. So where I am in San Fernando, we have the San Fernando DMC. Where I work, there is the Pinal Debe DMC. And there are several other towns around Trinidad: Rio Claro, Sandy Grande, Chaguanas, Port of Spain, Diego Martin, Piarco, where there are established DMCs. Now, what happens at the DMC? In Trinidad, it took at least 12 years to get to the point where the DMC has a compound, right, a physical building where there are a couple offices as well as some provisions laid up. Is that enough for the entire national community? No way. No way. But they have a coordination that they can send aid to those who are hardest hit. All right, so let me see what else I want to focus on this evening. All right, so the local and these district disaster management groups, let's say us in San Fernando here, in Marabella, which is a sub-community of San Fernando, we may have the ability to assist. And let's say in nearby La Romaine, I'm just calling names, I don't expect you all to know where, but let's say 2 miles away, there's a community that's very hard hit. We in the Marabella area can decide we're going over to help, but it's better if you go to the DMC, the Disaster Management Center, and let them know the resources you can provide so that they can coordinate. So let's suppose they have a truck that they're going to mobilize to take some resources to that community. Instead of my community trying to get there, this truck that's authorized by the DMC may be able to get police escort and get to the people faster. So it's important to coordinate. Remember also, oftentimes after a major disaster, a state of emergency is declared and curfews are often implemented. However, despite a curfew, if I'm in need, I would hope that somebody has the authority to go beyond the curfew impositions to come to me to give me aid. And these would normally be the people authorized by the DMC. All right, the Australian government and all of that. Now, prevention, we've talked about that. There's only so many physical things that you can do to prevent a disaster, but you can prepare. All right. And a big part of a disaster resilient community is where citizens understand their disaster risk and are strengthened with the risk management approaches taken. We need citizens to invest in disaster risk reduction. And then as the years go by, to improve in their disaster preparedness. Now, until things happen, you will always get the naysayers. For example, when some of my friends who know how I prepare, when the month of April and May comes around, they tell me, ah, boy, you're going hurricane shopping, because I would need to stock back up on batteries, drinking water, purification supplies. Some of these things, they do have a shelf life and they expire. So it's in your best interest to restock and resupply. And I always have one or two friends who make it a point to tell me, oh, all this preparation that you're making and nothing happens. But in the past 2 years, not a single person has told me anything. So while we did not face an earthquake or face a hurricane, we did face a pandemic with lockdown imposition. And fortunately for me and my family, we were pretty comfortable because of my preparedness attitude. And I've been advocating that to a lot of people. And some people are now starting to realize that, if I should start preparing because I do not know what is going to happen. And this is the message that we're trying to get out, at least to the community level. And if we, as chaplains in a community, can take this message to those that we interact with in our community, it will help a lot. That will be part of our mitigation and improvement. On a national level, every year the government is working to maintain essential infrastructure. All right. But in the past 2 years, this has been a challenge with workforces having to stay home. All right. So there's hardly been any infrastructure improvement. In fact, the construction community in Trinidad has only restarted for the year. All right. After Carnival, after February, with the restrictions imposed for about 5 months, there was no construction activity except for essential government infrastructure. Now, in terms of preparedness arrangements, there's a lot that local communities can do. All right. And one of the big things is simply preparing people and arming them with knowledge. It is not going to be practical for a church or a community group to stock enough supplies to maintain any community post disaster. It is not practical. How much food are you going to stock in your church basement? There's certain things you won't be able to stock because they're perishable by nature. So certain things, why spend all that resources in, let's say, it might sound like a good idea to buy a lot of food and have it ready, but it doesn't really make practical sense because you're going to have to spend it every year. It's better if you prepare emergency supplies, for example, candles or cots and blankets, so that if people are displaced from their homes, they can get at least access to those things. And then you coordinate with the disaster management centers, where they have a system that they can access foodstuff to take to needy disaster hit areas and people. So your church compound can be a staging point where the national disaster management level can be activated and use your locale as a platform to reach the needy communities with your assistance. But for all that to happen, you have to be prepared and you have to have conversations with those who have the responsibility at the national or the district level. All right, in Ezekiel 38:7, we are told clearly, be thou prepared and prepare for thyself, thou and all thy company that are assembled unto thee, and be thou a guard unto them. All right, in 1 Timothy 5:8, we are also told, but if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he has denied the faith and worse than an infidel. So you have the fact that you're listening to this is no happenstance. You have been chosen to hear this information, and you now have a responsibility to act. Now, the couple hours that we have to interact is not going to fully prepare you, but at least it's going to tease your brain and get you thinking about whether you're prepared or what you may need to do to get better prepared. Education is the key. All right. So that's basically the business that my company is in educating people, giving you assistance with creating your plans, preparing you by training, and there's a lot of things that you can get, resources you can get online and from different non-governmental organizations, NGOs. They also have a lot of things that you can do online. So you need to get into getting the information and using it. Planning involves clearly identifying the desired end state and the objectives to be achieved. I want my family and my church, I want my tribe to survive any disaster. What are the disasters that most likely I'm going to be faced with? And how do we survive? Right? We have to make a plan for that. And we have to practice. You can write the best plan, but if you never pull it out and practice it, when something happens, you won't know what to do. Okay, so I had been preparing my kids for what to do in event of a fire, in event mommy or daddy falls down, collapses, and is unable to breathe. What can you do? And they're small, they're only 7 and 10, but they know what to do. I mean, they might get scared when I tell them it's time to practice, but it served us well last year when I partially lost my home to fire. My wife, because of our preparedness mindset, my wife was able to save my children, save a lot of the important documentation, and save part of our home by quick thinking and swift action. But she knew what to do. She admitted afterwards that, in the panic of the situation, she almost froze. But because we had talked about it and we had practiced, it came back to her and she knew what to do. To the point where when the fire services arrived, they said, "Lady, we best put a bunker suit on you because the way you acted, even trained firefighters would not have done what you did." All right, so I want to advocate preparedness. All right, now when you're planning, there's activation and triggers. So you can decide, well, the DMC, the Disaster Management Center, they would operate on 4 levels. Alert level, this is when they're warned that something is imminent. The lean forward, the stand up, and the stand down. All right, so they have 4 different activation levels and triggers, and they have it down to a science because they're paid to do that. You may not need to go um, all that level with your church group or with your community, but certainly you need to understand how these DMCs, right, or DCCs operate. Communication systems and public information and warnings. Essentially, every state and every country has a public broadcast system now. In Trinidad, they use the major carriers with broadcast alerts via SMS. All right, I haven't seen one for a while, but I know it was activated and put in place and tested. Right. So in the past couple of years, I don't know if they opted not to panic the population by using it about pandemic, but I know up to the time, let's see, 2018, yeah, up to 2018, it was functional. Throughout the Caribbean, there is a tsunami warning system in place, and SIDEMA and SIDERA have been integral in setting this up. And it is functional right now. So should there be a massive earthquake anywhere in the Atlantic or the Caribbean, we have a tsunami warning system that it's designed to give some type of advance warning to coastal communities for evacuation purposes. However, in my trip to Grenada past a few weeks, a lot of people living along the coast still aren't sure where they're going to go in terms of if they have a tsunami warning. All they know is that I need to go uphill, right? But in exactly where and how to get there, they, they're woefully inadequately prepared. And in Trinidad also, a lot of people in coastal communities are underprepared where they're going to go to should they have a tsunami warning. Media management, this is more to the disaster management center. But this is one thing that you may want to look at if your church group is mobilizing resources, then you have to let the resources you have know that you should have one channel to deal with the media so that you don't have conflicting information. Evacuation versus sheltering arrangements. This is sometimes you may have to evacuate and be told that you have to evacuate. Other times, depending on where you are, you may need to shelter in place. You have to prepare for both of them. And there's a lot of websites that tell you what provisions you should be making and how to do it, what you need to carry if you need to evacuate, or what you need to have stocked if you need to shelter in place. Evacuations would involve 5 stages. There first must be a decision to evacuate. All right, then there must be a warning sent, the actual withdrawal from a dangerous area to a safer location, and then how you're going to shelter at the safer location. And you don't want to stay there all your life. You want to return to your home. And that has to be planned and managed also. All right. Logistics. This is where my company helps a lot of organizations in planning before the event, practicing for what to do during the event and after the event. Right. And the accountabilities that are required when we're dealing with resources and how to manage resources before, during, and after an event. So the whole logistics aspect, that's a whole other training module that we're not going to go into here, but should you require assistance with that, we're here to help you. But for your own logistics, you should have your own emergency supplies. I make that emphasis yet again. Right? Offers of assistance. If you are well organized and your community group decides that you are going to offer assistance, please remember that you should do it through the DMC. So if you have a team of volunteers, you are responsible for your volunteers. And there's a lot of people, you know, because of their sense of community, they would like to assist. They would like to go and render some help. But if you're not prepared, if you're not trained, the would-be helper then becomes a victim. All right, so in terms of volunteer management, this is another thing that we do. Training volunteers to be able to serve. You should have, there's a lot of young people who this training will benefit them in industry and as young adults. There's stuff like collapse structure mitigation, first aid, coordination. There's a lot of different trainings, and the ODPM in Trinidad has a lot of training that they do on a regular basis, training more and more volunteers. All right, I think we're going to close off there for today. All right. And we'll take some questions now. So let me just check the chat here.
Dr. Damian, so do you want to end the screen share there?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. All right, I know someone had their hands up earlier with some questions.
Yeah, that was I was looking for. Professor, what's his name again? I'm not seeing it in the chat anymore. He took his hand down, but now's the time to ask the question.
All right, let me take this opportunity to welcome everyone here. I see many familiar faces. Dr. Sherry and Stephen, thank you for being here with us. And once again, to honor His Royal Majesty, to be with us today, and all the various chiefs, honorable ambassadors. We welcome everyone. So Gerard has a question. I'm just going to unmute you. Go ahead, Gerard.
Hey, greetings, everyone. I appreciate everything. I'm sitting here. My brother did mention he had a question, but I'll divulge it to you guys. In regards to the disasters, the natural disasters, he mentioned about vehicles. Especially through those situations. Are there going to be vehicles, depending on the size of the damage or the severity of it? Will there be vehicles there to actually abstract anybody before things get a little detrimental, or after, the disaster takes place? These are the questions that I'm asking for some people, that are shy.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, every country is different.
Yes.
There's some Caribbean countries that are extremely mountainous, like Dominica. So, 4x4s are what people would prefer to use there. But in Barbados, Barbados has one of the Caribbean's best building codes.
Yes.
Right? Followed closely by St. Lucia.
Okay.
All right. They're even better than Trinidad and Jamaica. And they have enforced that, there's only certain materials that are allowed for you to construct your homes. So in terms of debris on the road, there's going to be a lot less in Jamaica or St. Lucia. And what you would find is natural vegetation would be the major problem, fallen trees and the like. So their disaster management agencies have stocked tools for clearing vegetation, such as one or two 4x4s with winches, but certainly chainsaws and the protective gear that you need to wear with chainsaws and fuel for the chainsaws. At the ODPM and the DMCs in Trinidad, there are stocks of such tools that can be deployed. But in terms of vehicles, it depends on the budget.
Okay.
In Trinidad, we have 4 amphibious vehicles, but we have 1.4 million people. Where are we going to deploy that? The one place that I know they were used was in 2014 when we had a massive flood on our East Coast. And they had to actually use these amphibious vehicles to go to people who were stranded in their homes.
Yes.
All right. So that was the one time that I saw that they were deployed. I was the organization center coordinator for that rescue.
Understand.
But in Australia and in the US and Canada, there's a lot more resources in certain communities that are allocated for that kind of response because they're more prone, but they focus almost as much as providing infrastructure and equipment on preparing the people. So you'd see people in Colorado. Virtually everybody in Colorado has stocks because they're a mountainous type of community. Right? Their homes are stocked. They're ready for long, hard winters.
Yes.
Because they've chosen to live there. But if you come to Grenada and you want to live on the beach, it's a different story.
I understand. Okay.
But in terms of if it depends on where you live, if you're talking about how to spec a vehicle, then yeah, you could talk to me offline and I can make some recommendations.
I definitely will. I'm gonna leave my email online again, so everyone, you know, that's a part of this could reach out to me at any time. Same thing with contact. My mother's from Barbados. You know, Henrietta Watts was my grandmother. So
All right.
it's a lot of things that we could actually put forth and do what we need to do to make sure that we have the adequate resources to help, because everybody needs this training. I've been training. I've done construction in New York, from Brooklyn originally, but I did construction in New York for 20 years, blacktop,
Right.
cement. I did tree cutting, you know, landscape. I've been training for this for years, you know, and the thing is that everybody needs this type of training. You know, I agree.
Thank you.
All right, if anybody else have questions concerning what was taught tonight, please show your hands and I will unmute. In the meantime, I know Dr. White teaches some similar things. I'm going to ask her to just come on for a moment.
Good evening, everyone, to everyone in their respectful place. Here in Florida, during the Obama reign, they created what they call the Corps, and its communities organized to respond to emergency, because they discovered that during a natural disaster, national disaster, whatever it was, that the aid that was being sent to certain places was not being disseminated appropriately. And so they created a pilot program similar to what you're talking about, excepting they incorporated organizations within different communities to participate. So some people were part of the food banks, some were communication, others were doing the CPR, etc. And so in a natural or national disaster, they would dispatch us. And our role was to ensure that the people who needed the help were getting the help. Because churches were more personalized to who goes to their church. And so if you didn't go to their church and help was given to a particular church, then you might not get any help. And so I'm listening to what you're saying and I'm like, wow, this is like the core. And it actually did work a lot and was sent out across the board to many of the American cities. So I'm excited about this opportunity to see the similar things across the globe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. White. I'm also gonna ask Dr. Sherian to come on for a moment. I know she's in Barbados and deals with governments and hello, Dr. Sherian.
Hi, good evening, everyone. It's indeed a pleasure to be here. Here in Barbados, we just recently had some bad weather. We've been able to mobilize our agencies to offer assistance across the island. We were preparing for a while. In Barbados, we don't really have much activity like the other islands. However, this time around, we've been having some freak storms, lightning storms, and we just had Hurricane Elsa pass. And within the completion of the passage of Hurricane Elsa, they were quickly able to mobilize the emergency services to get out to persons. Government had funds put aside for persons to repair roofs. And so this time around, we were able to move faster because we were ready and we were prepared. I think what is needed this forum is very, very good. I really actually enjoyed the presentation for what I was able to listen to. And I think that education is really, really important. Just as the presenter said, he trained his wife and his children, and we need to personalize it as well. If we can get it into the homes, get it with persons who are able to be trained, and they pass it on to their families, pass it on to their friends, we can have a greater impact. Most of the times, persons think, well, this doesn't relate to me, this isn't for me. But if we can get the education into the homes, then we will have a greater impact and be able to be more prepared when the disaster hits, and then be able to get back in operation mode as soon as possible. So thank you very much for having me on tonight. It was indeed a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Sherian.
Thank you.
All right. Dr. Damian?
Yes, sir. So thank you for the encouragement, for the feedback that reinforces what we've been saying. And, you know, this is not a homework class where I'll tell you, please show me your personal disaster management plan. But I'm going to emphasize it for the ninth time tonight. Sit down and make one. All right. Especially if you have kids, teach them. In case there's a fire, how do you find the back door blindfolded? How do you negotiate opening the door and opening the burglar proofing, or as they say in Suriname, the thief iron?
Hmm.
Right? How do you do that? Most of us, if you have kids under 12, they don't do that. You're the one that gets up early and open the place. So do your kids know how to open their front and back doors at night or blindfolded? And that's an important one because every year kids die in house fires because they could not get out.
Yep.
All over the Caribbean. So it's a simple thing to teach them what to do. Fire prevention and mitigation. Our role is to educate. We are the instructors. We have to teach the kids. And then we have to teach our neighbors' kids. And we have to teach all the kids in our church community. So you can't teach what you don't know.
That's right. That's very right. Dr. Steele?
Pleasant good evening, everyone. First, honor to His Royal Majesty Custom. Your Majesty, you're very welcome. Dr. Kiwi, pleasant good evening. Dr. Damian, always such an absolute pleasure to sit under your teaching. I've sat on we've sat on quite a few, and there will never be a time where I'm not fully captivated to be attentive, because it is very good information to have. I just want to briefly appreciate all of our associates and partners, individuals out of Africa who are here. And I want to commend His Excellency, the Chief Governor, Dr. Kiwi, for allowing this very important aspect of peace ambassadors to be trained, included within chaplaincy. There's some tenets that as we go forward, you recognize, how does this fit into being a peace ambassador? How does it fit into being a chaplain? So Dr. Kiwi, I again applaud this structure that is in place, but equally I also applaud the fact that it's available for everyone freely, in as much as it's a certified course that you pay for your certifications. Just for the administrative costs, it is very important that you invite individuals that they're capable to sit and listen and learn, because there's no harm in having this knowledge. And that's why it is available freely for all to receive, because our jobs and our business and our interest is in saving lives and creating an environment where individuals are safe. And even if they're in situations where they're unsafe, they know what to do and they have a sense of how to do it. Dr. Sherian, I bless you. So lovely to hear Bajan voice. I'm from Barbados as well, and the Central Emergency Relief Organization in Barbados. Dr. Damon, you're aware, and it's so critical, the things that we have in place. And I hope that our African brothers and sisters that are here this evening would find significant value in what we're doing and implement similar measures. Get a hold of Dr. Damian and the rest of the team and see how we can help you create those things that would be able to empower others to be equipped. Don't take it as a joke. Climate change and the different dynamics that are happening right now are bringing so many uncertainties, but it's beautiful to know that we can sit together on a forum like this and gain wisdom. Dr. Damian, excellent presentation as always, and I'm absolutely looking forward to your presentation on Thursday with great anticipation. Thank you, everyone. Your Excellency,
Thank you very
Chief
much,
Governor,
Dr.
thank
Steele.
you.
Thank you, Dr. Steele. I'm just going to bring on Pastor John for a moment from St. Lucia.
Hi to all. Good night, Dr. Kiwi and
Hello,
all
Pastor
my
John.
members. Dr. Damian, actually, I always look forward for disaster management. And I don't know if it's surprising, last week, the bishop asked every church to have a plan in place.
Mhm.
So I might have to give you a call to ask for some advice,
Not a
but
problem.
especially the church where we are located is in a disaster zone for flooding. And
Mhm.
so I need to put a proper plan in place. So I
We're here
might
to
need your
help.
support. And God has helped me to educate myself through these meetings. And I pray that you continue the good work. And my wife also in charge of the nurses. She's a nurse. Yes, and she was saying as though she would have to give you a call so that I believe she would want you to help her in some areas also.
Sure.
Blessings to all.
Thank you, Pastor John.
Yes, yes.
I know quite a few times we had tried to give Dr. Hillary Enoch opportunity to come on. But due to the signal, so we're gonna try to give him an opportunity tonight. Dr. Hillary. All right. Okay. Does anyone have any questions that you want to address to Dr. Damian before we move on to another part here?
I just put my email up so on the chat, so you can always copy that off and feel free to contact me.
All right, I'm going to take this opportunity to just give His Royal Majesty Kassom an opportunity to say hello and express his heart for a moment.
Hello.
Hello, Your Majesty.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, we are.
Okay. Privileged once again to be among you. May I recognize His Excellency Kiwi, my good friend Dr. Steele, Lamont, Joseph Lamont, Bishop Joseph Lamont, my namesake. It's a great time to be with you and to listen to these great lectures. Disaster is disaster. It will come when you are not prepared, when you don't know of it. And Damian tried to quote some scriptures from the Bible. And that is to tell us that even the scriptures recognize disaster. And I think it is not for nothing sake the Philippines have the NOAA project, which is a disaster management plan. In the days of Noah, Prudence told him to prepare. God spoke to him to prepare for a disaster. And when he was doing it, people thought he was joking and people made fun. But disaster, there came a time and the whole land, the whole earth was inundated. And because he had prepared, he was able to save himself and all those who heard his word. And so I'm thinking in this circumstance, that we who would also listen to Damian and take to his advice, we will be saved when the evil days come. I am very much involved in disaster management in my community because I am a leader, but little have I been so serious, have I taken personal disaster management as serious as Damian is prescribing. I think today I've learned something very important, and I will want to contact Damian to discuss more on that. And I think every one of us here should think about this personal disaster plan for his house or for his home. I would end here, but I have my very good friend from Nigeria, His Eminence Batsi, Ojoy Batsi. And I think Ojoy Batsi would have a lot to tell us because he's a man of many sides, judge, traditional ruler, whatever. And on his invitation, I mean, we have invited him, myself, in collaboration with Dr. Comfort, Bishop Comfort. And so if you could give him opportunity to introduce himself and also to give us something a bit for the day. Thank you. Be blessed.
Okay, thank you, Your Majesty. Is he on with us separately, Your Majesty?
Yeah, he's in Nigeria, but he's on. He's with us. Let me. Dr. Comfort. Prof. Ojoy. Oh, let me look for
What is his name, Your Majesty?
Professor Ojoy, His Eminence Professor Ojoy, Archbishop Professor Ojoy. Ojoy. Batsy. Hello?
I saw him earlier,
I saw him too.
but I don't see him now.
Oh, has he fallen out?
Yeah, he was on earlier, way earlier.
Oh, okay. I saw him too.
Yes, but he's not here at the moment.
Okay, okay. Then we can
Maybe
go ahead.
on the next session when he's there, we'll allow him to come on, okay?
Okay, okay. That's okay.
All right, thank you, Your Majesty, for such kind words and your support and being here. We certainly appreciate it. Bishop Lamont, before we close out, I'm just gonna unmute you here. Go ahead.
Thank you, Excellency. Good evening to all, His Royal Majesty, Dr. Steele, Chief Governor, all the doctors, Queen Princesses, Chief on this tremendous platform, and also to Dr. Damian, our Ambassador at Large. Indeed, knowledge has been given to us, and I trust that we will be able to ascertain that knowledge and implement it wherever we are. As we are living in troublous time, we are living in perilous time. And I think it's time that the wisdom that is given to us, we're able to build and protect our people and communities. So again, I want to applaud Chief Governor Dr. Kiwi Kalloo, my friend, from very, very young. We wouldn't call our age now, but it's really an honor to work with him on this platform. I give all honor to you, sir, and I thank you with all my heart for this wonderful opportunity to serve such a people. God bless you.
Thank you, everyone. Once again, I want to just take this opportunity to say thank you very much for allowing me to serve you in this capacity with much great honor. Everyone for the time and your efforts being here for this great investment in self and the people that we lead. I want to say God richly bless you. And I'm looking forward to see you again on Thursday for part 2 of Disaster Management, which will be taught by His Excellency Dr. Damian Ramesar. So God bless you, and we will see you on Thursday. Good night, everyone.
Good night.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Good night. Good night. Good night.